Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and today I'm going to be showing off a Winter Orb character for you. Now, all league long people have been like, hey Matthew, check out Winter Orb, it's amazing, and, well, it kind of is. I've avoided it for the most part the entire league because I didn't want to affect any more prices, and I don't really want to jump straight onto the hottest, best meta skills out there because it's obvious that they're going to be good and succeed once everyone already knows about that. So I try and just bide my time for when I'm finally going to do it and see if I can bring something a little different to the table. Not sure I really have achieved that. This is just a low-life Winter Orb Inquisitor that then has a bunch of conversion to fire, which then does a lot of elemental as non-chaos as well, based off of the conversion. So it's not entirely different, I don't think, but I just wanted to actually play around with Winter Orb as well, just like everyone else had, and experience why this skill is so amazing according to everyone. And well, basically it's because it's a more ranged Blade Vortex. So Blade Vortex, as we all know, pretty fucking amazing, can do a lot of single target, can shit on screens, and has a nice smooth playstyle. This is a very similar sort of playstyle and skill where you are channeling before packs, trying to get your stacks of Winter Orb from 1 up to 10 based off of duration, and then it'll just auto fire for you while the stacks are up, except it's more of a range skill, and in that sense it can be particularly slightly more safe and possibly more or less fun depending on how you look at it, because as you can see in quite a few situations I am just going to be standing still, channeling my shit, and it's going to auto-target everything for you, and maybe that's a bit boring for some people, not enough engagement, not enough action, but on the other hand, situations like this arise where you face 3 leagues worth of content and just it shits all over everything on the screen without you putting in too much effort, and in some cases, some sense, that's actually kind of fun and satisfying to see. So I have done quite a lot of just huge maps like these where I'm putting in triple breach scarabs and rolling beyonds and sextanting up the map, and Winter Orb just destroys everything, and it has been pretty damn strong so far. I am trying to min-max the character to some extent though as well to really see what it can do up until the end game and try and get a bit of delving and some Uber Elder farming with it, since I haven't had a character farming Uber Elder in a few weeks quite as smoothly as some of my best ones. You can see I also turn on Screen Shake for 1 or 2 maps, and it changes the way you play the game. It doesn't feel like the same game anymore, and my monitor feels like it's about to fall off the table, but it can be a little bit of fun as well, just showcasing what a Screen Shake and an Automaton Herald of Ice can look like. So in essence, the skill is charge up to hopefully 10 stacks of Winter Orb. A lot of people's builds are based off of duration so that you don't have to charge up anywhere near as much. I don't worry too much about that. I don't need the fastest, most balls deep gameplay out there. I'm happy to charge it up every few packs, and you don't necessarily even need 10 stacks for most of these packs and most of the clearances out there. And I'm also not using the +2 Winter Orb stage helmet chart, which should be pretty insane for this type of build, and appropriately so. The cheapest helm to craft off of for that base is something like 8 exalts. Not going to bother doing something like that, but I am trying to min-max to some extent, and I'll show you what the gear's like in just a second. Crafted every single piece, and had to get a whole new bunch of energy shield gear as we are low life on this Inquisitor. This is a currently level 83, I believe, Delve Abyssal City, and it's a really nice playstyle for that. This is the first example of when I decided to try out Ice Spear as well, so with the cast while channel setup. Traditionally, for my playing of the Winter Orb, I am just plain Winter Orbing around, but for the heavier content, stuff like this, and also end game single target DPS, I'm going to be chucking in cast while channeling and Ice Spear, replacing 2 of my blue sockets, and it does seem to work quite nicely. The Winter Orb itself still does a shitload of damage, and while you're channeling up your Winter Orb, you get huge amounts of damage coming in from your Ice Spears. According to my POV, something like 1.5 to 2 million damage if all of the Ice Spears connect, and it's very simple to build around both at the same time because they both need projectiles like GMP and Dying Sun. And then of course we are just a bunch of fire converted, a bunch of cold converted to fire converted to chaos, or added as chaos rather. So that's what the character looks like so far. Let's jump into how I've built it. So we're currently looking at a level 89 Inquisitor called Saggy Old Man Orbs. I was maybe going to do some Magma Orb cast or channeling, but Ice Spear makes quite a bit more sense. And at this point, it's taken us 14 hours to get to this level. So it's been pretty fast leveling for my sort of standards. And like I mentioned, it is based around a low life setup. So that means I'm wearing a Shavs. So chaos damage cannot bypass energy shield. That then means you reserve more than 70% of your life with auras, and then you are effectively at low life always. And in this case, I've attached Herald of Ash. Blood Magic has to be over level 19, and Herald of Ice to my life, so that I can then free up my entire mana pool and also be at low life all the time. I don't actually have fully reserved mana yet for other things, and I'll get over that in just a second. But the skill we're based around is Winter Orb, and it looks something like this. As you can see, stand still and channel goes from 1 to 10 stacks and then slowly goes down as you're not channeling, and there's your little pretty Winter Orb above you. It just then shoots its own little splooge projectiles against enemies at its own rate. I don't have a huge amount of duration, as you can see, but it's enough for my own purposes. Starts out with a bunch of cold damage, and as you get more stacks, it then attacks faster, and you typically want to attach more and more projectiles to it, as it only starts out with 1. So GMP is a huge damage multiplier in this case, and then Dying Sun becomes a pretty large damage multiplier as well. And it's initially fully cold, and we then convert into fire with cold to fire support gem. So a lot of our damage goes from cold and then into fire, and then we also gain a lot of fire, and then we also run a pyre which converts almost the rest of my cold into fire. So then I'm still doing 10% cold, which is enough to help shatter things, but as well as that, we explode corpses with the pyre, which is pretty useful for deeper delving. Now, the purpose of this to convert to fire in this manner is that 90% of my original cold goes to fire, and I then have something like 45% elemental damage as extra chaos, thanks to this weapon here, which does 19% elemental as chaos, 16% of non-chaos as extra chaos, and then a shield which has 11% of non-chaos as extra chaos. So the purpose there is we have about 45% LE as non-chaos, and that applies to the original cold we have, as well as the converted new element of fire. So the non-chaos is based off of your original cold and your current fire. So in essence, it double dips that way, and that's why it's so valuable in this type of setup and build. As you can see, I have something like, let's say, 2.8 to 3.6 thousand fire damage, but I've also got 2.2 to 2.8 thousand chaos. So considering I have something like 45% LE as chaos, I am currently dealing almost close to 100% of my current fire as chaos, since it is double dipping. So something like 90% of my damage is getting that extra chaos in total, and so roughly half my damage is some element, half my damage is chaos. So you could also make the argument for something like an occultist on this character, because you know, some good chaos damage scaling and minus chaos aura. You can also drop a wither totem into your setup, because a lot of your damage is going to be chaos. But I'm just rolling the classic Inquisitor for ignoring elemental resists with this thing over here, and not really worrying too much else about the chaos scaling itself. And as well as that, being an Inquisitor does have some pretty nifty energy shield nodes up here. If you've never used them, you get Sanctify, which just splooges consecrated ground everywhere. And then if you stand in your consecrated ground, you get very nice mana regen and very nice energy shield regen, while gaining some cast speed and immune to elemental ailments while standing on that ground too. And the point of that is you can also grab Zealot's Oath, and then you're generating, while on consecrated ground, 12% energy shield per second. And that's where a lot of our sustain comes from in this type of build, as well as grabbing Ghost Reaver, we also have Warlord's Mark on a ring, so that means that it's an energy shield character based off of pure regen and leech, as opposed to plenty that are going to be based around energy shield recharge and recharge rate and start time of your recharge, like the occultists typically are. So instead of that, we are just regen and leech based, and it does make for a pretty nice tanky character. You can see I'm about to grab a jewel socket here, otherwise it's kind of just doesn't make any sense. The passive tree, I think, though, is pretty straightforward for this type of thing. You're just grabbing a bit of area nodes, some energy shield wherever you can, couple of power charges, and then all the energy shield that you can get with some spell crit. And of course, you need probably at least one duration wheel. This is all I can really afford to get because going down here is fairly inefficient. But you do want some level of duration on your skill, and I've got that as well as that. I'm running efficacy, which is 16% skill effect duration. You could also run the actual duration gem. You can also run, let's say, a duration belt from the temple, but currently that's all the duration I'm getting. I think that's all I need. The rest of the gear, though, it's all pretty good at this point, but it's all very craftable. I crafted all of this myself, and it's just, you know, energy shield gear and in general multi-modding gear is so stupidly easy these days. As long as you've got the currency, you can make some pretty beefy stuff. So gloves like these do have an underground mod, so that means dense fossils. Boots like these do have an underground mod, which means dense fossils. A shield like this, what do you know, an underground mod, dense fossils. And this helm just got randomly dense fossiled by itself, and there you go, underground mod, a bunch of other shit, a really nice helm there too. So the character's gear is going to be pretty damn sexy at this point, but it is all very realistically craftable. This shield, for example, all you're really looking for is some high energy shield. The tier 1 roll and then the underground roll, and I managed to roll another one of those pretty easily, that you can multi-mod around and then just get the non-chaos as chaos and some double damage while focused if you want. If you're going for the exact same roll as me, for example, if you want maximum damage, you're going to need to be able to have a spare prefix and a spare suffix for those rolls, but getting a shield that just has 300 energy shield with a spare prefix for the non-chaos is ideal, and that's all you really need. Those things should be cheap and easy to attain, but overall I'm trying to push the boundaries of my character as much as I can with good energy shield and then pretty good damage and sustain and all of that. So it's going to be a bit more expensive. I'd say a much cheaper version of this build will just be another pure life-based Inquisitor with mind over matter. You don't really need too many auras or anything, just a Herald of Ice, a Herald of Ash. So yeah, you could quite easily just do a life base, unreserve a bunch of your mana and use mind over matter, and you probably have similar sorts of damage, similar sorts of results as my character right now anyway, but I wanted to try out the low life variant. So besides that, we have Arcane Surge, Power Charge on crit, Orb of Storms, and Increased Crit. This is just going to be purely a boss setup. I don't really have anything specific going on in my boots yet, but I will quite likely get an Arctic Armor happening and an Aspect of the Spider to fill up the rest of my mana. But I've got a Shield Charge, Fortify, and faster attacks over here, and a Blood Rage up here, which I can sustain thanks to all of my regen and my leech just fine. And as well as that, Cinder Swallow Urn is actually pretty damn nice for this build too. And then I'm running Discipline, Flame Dash, and faster casting over here. And this is of course my focus button, which just triggers 18% double damage and 15% double damage over here. So quite a lot of extra double damage when you get down to it. This is our POB, it's 1.6 million on Ice Spear, and that's with the Castwell channel setup. If you tick Are You Focused? Huge extra amounts of damage. And in that setup, that means I'm running Winter Orb, GMP, Efficacy, and Cold Defier. That's my staple. Currently I'm running faster casting and crit strikes for Winter Orb. That's for farming. But when we get back down to real business, you put in Ice Spear, you put in Castwell channeling, and you then channel your Winter Orb and shoot out Ice Spears everywhere, which will do huge damage. And that does mean that you can easily run a multi-modded staff, Eclipse staff with Castwell channeling to begin with. Ideally, Castwell channeling and Power Charge on crit, and you get much more damage than my build in the end if you do that. If you're going to do that though, you probably want to be CI or life based. You definitely don't want to mess around with low life and a staff, meaning you won't have a shield, because that will generate some pretty low energy shield numbers. But the ideal setup here is most likely going to be a cast while channeling staff, and that's probably what I'd recommend if you're going to be going for maximum damage on a budget as a life-based build. Currently though, that's the character. I don't have any endgame or single target to show you yet. That'll be in the next video, and I think this should steamroll everything I come up against, so hopefully it will be a strong one. But for now guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and the rundown. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.